the finished product, color, all that kind of stuff.
It is the worst experience.
Oh, yeah?
It is the worst experience. It is the constant of heartache and love of outside of production of, oh my God, this movie we just shot, I hate it. It was so hard and it was so draining. And we're gonna go into this long process of multiple cuts and multiple passes that are marginally different, and I'm not gonna see what I wanted to see. And then all of a sudden you get like the second cut, and you're just like, oh my God, this is the greatest film I've ever written around. My life. And then
What is everyone? Welcome to Nerd on the Podcast you didn't need, but you deserve, where all levels of nerd are welcome.
Yeah, you
Every single one. Today, we're diving into our second part of our Nerds Explain the Film Industry with Tom, talking about directing and... What?
I was like, about what?
About what? You tell us, man. What are you talking about today?
About breathing.
All right.
There it is.
I'm Corey.
And I'm Josh.
I'm Tom.
But really, we're talking about directing and writing.
Yes.
Yes.
This episode is brought to you in part by the members of the Nerd On Nation that is powered by Patreon. Patreon. The members of the Nerd On Nation, as a member, you support us in making more content, but you get cool shit when you do. You get early access to episodes. You get bonus episodes that nobody else hears, like the extra, like the extra, the minute, capeless extra. Sometimes we do behind the scenes videos. Sometimes we do vlogs, and they're just for you.
We actually have. I've been doing those behind the scenes videos of like outtakes of what we actually what it was before we hit action. So
the chaos and mayhem that
you would enjoy.
It's true.
Our antics.
The true. So check that out, nerdon.tv/Patreon. And also check out our Discord. It's an amazing community that keeps growing. And there's just so many cool conversations over there. So check it out, nerdon.tv/Discord. And an honorable mention to Odyssey, Apogee, and Embody Audio. Check them out.
Embody
Cool companies. Cool companies. Cool programs and products. Check them out.
Enhances your entertainment.
Yes. But what else, Tom? What other housekeeping
What else can we enhance?
do we have?
Well, I'm glad we are in the spirit.
Yes.
In the holiday spirit at this point. Because support for Nerd On is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Because you know what? We're decking the halls with balls of jolly. Gifting season is upon us, and we're here to get the hair off of you. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for the Yuletide holidays. With 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code NERDON at manscaped.com.
Yeah. Nice.
And
I said, shout out, you wrote that?
Yeah, I did.
He spiced it up.
You know, while you're salting the driveways, you could be trimming some hedges in your nose with these weed whackers in store. Again, it is a Nerd On favorite. You know, some people have different preferences of how they like to keep their chestnuts roasting. But everyone can say that they want to make sure that there are no bats in the chimney with this weed whacker.
Yep. Pine trees aren't the only thing that need to be cut down this time of the year.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah. It's happening.
Yeah, it's happening.
And there's going to be a bunch of new products this holiday season. Check it out. Again, the promo code NERDON works on everything at manscaped.com. So please use it.
Menorah may burn for 8 crazy nights, but you don't want 8 crazy hairs coming out of your nose.
Yes.
So cut them with a lawnmower.
Ding.
The perfect gift for any holiday.
Where's the triangle? Bing.
Oh man, you already used to have that.
I know it's somewhere in one of the drawers.
Tom, we gotta bring that back. Yes.
So we out here.
The
first part, we put me on the block. We were talking about audio.
Oh man, you should have just left it. It's not that big of a deal. You just close the curtains behind
For
you.
those
that
listening,
is directing, guys. You got to make sure the frame looks great.
Tom just got up, for those listening, to close the curtain behind us because it looks much better on video. But we are putting Tom on blast to talk about writing and directing in this part 2 of Nerds Explain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna start off. What do you do? No, I'm just kidding.
I feel like I want to turn.
I ask him that every day at storyboard.
I feel like I want to.
What do you do?
I feel like I want to turn my chair backwards, pull a catch maker. So you decided you want to direct, huh?
Welcome to my TED Talk.
So writing and directing is a very general, aggrandized.
Is that the is that when you like, let's say, website, or when you meet somebody, like, do you say I'm a writer director? Is that how you introduce yourself?
I feel like I say director first and foremost.
Okay.
That's what I set out to do. I set out to direct things, and I wanted to, ever since I was a kid, I watched like a bunch of films. Films was like my second language, if someone wants to say that. They were the third parent in the household, and I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to give an audience the feeling that I got from watching a film and feeling comfort, discomfort, scares, and laughs, and humors, and adventure, everything like that. So directing and directing other people's work, and taking their stories and writing, and trying to amplify their voices, and interpret it to a visual medium. Writing directing kind of happened mainly because I saw there were so many people who were writing their own projects. It made me feel like it was something that was possible to be done. But to me, some of my favorite films are directed by people who did not write it. Right, like
Yeah.
Robert Zemeckis didn't write Back to the Future. David Fincher did not write Seven. He did. There are Christopher Nolan did not write Batman Begins. And so it's things like that where I enjoy the craft and the trust between writer and director, and then again amongst everyone else during the production period. But when I introduce myself, I just say I'm a director, and typically the reason why I've adopted writer director, the moniker, is purely because when you're making your way, and you're still independent, and you're not a household name yet, no one's just going to give you a script.
What?
So you have to write it yourself.
To make your own projects.
You have to make your own projects.
Make your own work.
What do I do in that sense?
Yeah. Let's peel it back a little bit. Like, in a simplest sense, like, what do you do as a writer director?
I feel like the best way I could think about it, I am the second storyteller and aims to be the last storyteller of a certain project. But that also means I am slightly a therapist. I am also a team leader. I am a decision maker. I am someone who corrals the team to keep a good day going. It comes down to a funny balance, and I think a lot of people tend to blur the lines of what a director is responsible for. A lot of people will say, like, every single thing that the film does, the director is responsible for. Again, there are people who strive to be auteurs and such things, and I always feel like the only people who really are like Wes Anderson or Hayao Miyazaki, because like absolutely everything they touch. But when it comes down to it, you as a director are putting your faith in the craft, the skill, the experience, and also the visions of other people. So, the costume designer, the set, decorators, the camera, the editing, all the production teams, everything. They came here for you, and you have to trust them that they can ascertain what you want to have done. And I mean, my basic always kind of analogy of like, what does a director do? It's like, have Wes Anderson direct Jurassic Park. It's a very different
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
Spielberg to direct Seven. It's a very different movie.
A lot more one-shotters.
Yeah. Also, maybe there's a kid for no reason. But a director, they have a voice, they have a vision, they have a perspective in the world and what they want to tell the stories with. And so finding the perfect marriage, like an Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher, is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to do the best that I can to make sure that I have something to say, and I want something to be interpreted in a story. Sometimes that comes down to just having the I guess you would say, like, the basics, right? And that's just kind of like, well, what's happening in this story? What's happening in this scene? Who's losing something? Who's winning something in this scene? What does this person have to offer? Why are we even here? Like, can we say this in one line?
They're asking the questions.
I'm asking the questions half the time.
No, that's what I
Yeah.
mean.
As a director.
Director, the director is asking the questions, like, to distill this project, this thing.
And
The
it
story.
goes both ways. You know, an actor has to ask that question too. You know, sometimes, you know, the cliche, like, what's my motivation? The director has to have that answer.
Yeah.
And the director has to have the storylines for every single character and what they're going to come with and how they can nuance the things. For someone like me, I tend to like directing actors in a way where I create a frame. I say, like, hey, we're living in the world of Jumanji. So how would you respond in the world of Jumanji? You wouldn't respond as if you're a chef in Jon Favreau's Chef, because that's a real world. You would respond as if you're on the run and there's giant, you know, spiders chasing after you. So act in that way, you know, because again, it's that trust that the people, the actors you've brought on, the crew and all that stuff, understand what world we're living in for which project we're working on. So
you don't want to pull a Schumacher either. I mean, for all the great things he did, that infamous Val Kilmer, what's my motivation here? You're fucking Batman. That's your motivation.
But then there's the other Schumacher thing, which happens in Batman and Robin, where he says, "Okay, we have what we do. Let's do one more for the artist."
Sure.
And then Schwarzenegger says, like, "I'm an artist," and then we're like, "Yeah, you are, Governor."
Yeah, you are. I gotta ask. We met at the fruit stand and have worked on a few. We've all worked on some projects together here under your directorial talents. My question is, was there a clear and distinct moment where you decided that this was something you wanted to kind of pursue? Was there a certain, whether it be a director, a movie that you went to see that piqued your interest the most, that you're like, I want to learn about this?
The funny thing, I think, as a kid, you rarely get the kid who's like, "I want to be a firefighter," and then the more they learn about it, they're like, "I really want to be a firefighter." You know, I think that sometimes the call of duty comes upon us when in moments of like big life changes or experiences. But directing for me in particular, it was more like I wanted to make movies, and I wanted,
Right.
and I saw that the person who kind of is in charge and just makes decisions was the director. So I really kind of fell in love with that, like, at a very young age. The movie that made me really want to start telling stories and making movies was the movie The Mask. Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz and everyone else in there.
I actually remember the day that I watched that.
I had the plasticky VHS, like, you had to squeeze. It was like a childproof VHS you know, container
on the sides.
Yeah,
slide out.
I had that, and I would watch that over and over and over again at like maybe 4 to 7 years old range. I was watching that movie nonstop. Highly suggestive for a kid like me, but I watched that and I absolutely loved the blending of reality, which was something that I lived in and I felt trapped by, but then also the freedom of cartoons, which I, you know, got to explore.
It's a comic book character.
Yeah. But you know, he broke the rules. He broke the chain of reality, but also, you know, he gets the girl at the end. He's a dorky guy, and there's clearly a
Nice
bad guy. But also there's some magic involved, and you know, like, there's a dog, and you know, so you have some movie magic in there where, you know, there's the string of Air Bud movies, but then like this is a real dog, but he gets to be a crazy dog.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff. But also there's a little bit dark and horror and scariness, and people are getting shot.
Touch
and
of everything. Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and it was kind of like, wow, you can contain that all into one story and have a really fun and enjoyable time. But as I got older, you know, I just completely, you know, I don't dismiss it, but I definitely don't use words of affirmation as much as probably would be healthy for me. But as a kid, I definitely probably used it a lot of like, I want to be a director. I want to be a director. I want to be a director. So I would just do everything I can to study and watch films of directors that I liked. So of course, you know, there's always the titans of Spielberg and Zemeckis, and then later on it became like, all right, let's see some Scorsese, let's see some Kubrick, let's see some, you know,
You're mixing the palette.
Yeah, I mean, it was more like
Not literally
you
mixing
went down
it,
the
but
rabbit
you're-
hole, and then you're
Yeah.
ending up with like Kurosawa. And stuff
yeah,
like that.
and well, and I mean, this is all before even any formal learning and all that stuff. This is all like in high school and junior high, where it was becoming like, okay, I really want to. I like comic books. I like this stuff. So I was like, let me get involved in those things. But comic books and all that stuff were never like, oh, let me see what this director does. You know, for me, it was more like, okay, cool. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, he's an actor, but you could tell that he's, you know, picking these roles based on what's good for his career. So it's like, is he a director? Do I want to do acting instead? Like, you know, you ask yourselves those questions. Like, maybe I was a crazy kid at like 12 asking myself, like, what do I really want to do? Is it directing, or is it acting, or is it producing? You know, like, what's the difference in those plays? But I would
I was just gonna say, didn't you've joked about this in the past, but I know that there's truth in it. But you grew up in an environment where that was an important question to be on your mind.
Yeah, every birthday, my parents were like, "What do you want to be? What do you want to be?" Every birthday since I was like 4 years old, and then I remember I was just like, "Yeah, I want to be a director," and they're like, "Okay," and because like Asian parents who are immigrants, they obviously want the best for me, and doing something in the movie industry, I think they obviously knew that like you'll have a bigger leg up if you know someone in there, your family's in there, and they had no connection, so they're like, just do something that's very utilitarian. But I definitely like Armageddon started becoming a thing. So Michael Bay, like I would see like all these big time movies, and I would see like what was winning, right? Like what was winning the social and cultural like conversations, and was whatever my parents were really giving me the diet of. Like so we would watch like Anaconda, or we would watch like
Hell
Hell
yeah.
yeah.
Finding Nemo. So a lot of the Disney stuff would come out, but then like a movie like Armageddon or Men in Black, and so it's like I got to see a lot of films, and I was like, okay, what kind of director do I want to be? And then that's when high school started coming in, and I think that's when like Batman Begins hit me, and I was like, I really did not like it when I first watched it, and I remember like realizing like, oh wow, this is really interesting, and then for some reason Equilibrium became a thing for me, and then American Psycho became a thing for me, and
You went on a Bail-a-sance.
So I was gonna say, so Christian
Christian
Bale became a thing for
me.
you.
But then and then I got into films, and I have to give my
Machinist.
friend credit, Curtis Phelps, who he's like, hey, also watch Donnie Darko, and so I started watching all these like kind of darker, more
Art housey.
indie films, and I was like, I didn't know you can make movies like this. And I'll throw another name out there, Kimberly Felix, now since she's married. She told me about the movie called A Chum Scrubber, and it's not a really well-known film,
No.
but it has all these A-list actors in this very kind of like almost surrealist avant-garde film. And I think most of them did not get paid doing it. They all just wanted to be in this very indie film. And it's about like this creepy suburbia, and someone like dies, and it's like all the family's falling apart because that one kid died. But like Glenn Close is in there. Like it's all these like huge big actors. And that really started to make me think like, oh, what can I do? What can I say? Like there's The Girl Next Door, American Pie, all these things are coming out. And I was like, I was just really trying to find my way of like, where am I going to sit in all this? Do I get to be one of these like directors who get to make like a fun rom-com, or like a teenage, college humor, funny film? Or do I want to do these actiony films? And do I have the money to do that? And I was just thinking about all those things. Like, man, how is this all going to happen? I was definitely like, okay, I got to be really good at school, go to a really good college, and then maybe I'll find a job. I now thinking about it, I'm like, how did I even think I was going to do this? But I remember watching this YouTube channel called Wong Fu Productions, and they
There it
still go
is.
on now.
Mhm.
And in high school, they had a short web series called Just a Nice Guy, and to me, it was very groundbreaking, only because it was younger dudes who put stuff on the internet, and they made like this narrative story that featured only Asian people. And it was wild. And I read about them, and then they were like, yeah, we are from UC San Diego. There's no film department. We're all science majors. And we were like, we want to make films that represent us. And I was like, wow. And so like, the soonest I can get my own camcorder, I started doing, the dumb,
The
you know,
Gauntlet.
well, I started doing, Windows Movie Maker on
Hell yeah.
Windows Vista, way better than Windows 7. I'll tell you that right now, because you can
No Windows XP.
Windows. Well, I didn't get Windows XP at that point. I remember changing our operating system to Windows XP, and I was like, oh, please God, bring me back to Vista, and I actually I remember I changed my Sony Vaio to a Dell operating system to get Vista back, because the editing system was so much better for me, the way I was shooting things. The fun thing about shooting on old camcorders is that you learn a lot of the dumb in-camera tricks of like how to cut in particular certain things.
Yeah.
Or like putting a headphone speaker into your speaker of your camera. So like I'm recording things, but I'm putting music over it already. So it's all done pre-production, not in post. Fix it in pre. And I was learning all these things. Like I was also learning how to do all these different types of moves, shooting things in reverse, all that stuff, like how to make, tricks of like how to make a collision happen, make it say you're just pulling back. All this stuff with the camcorder by my sophomore year of high school. And all I wanted to do was just upload this stuff to my YouTube channel that I was uploading like random skits. I remember I, for some reason, really like gravitated towards horror films, because I
Does
felt
that
like
still exist?
the YouTube channel?
Probably.
I think I might have taken down almost all the videos.
Dang
They're
it.
very embarrassing.
Yeah.
They're very
get that.
embarrassing. They make me cringe so
I
hard.
have a short that my friends we made in my senior year of high school that somebody found it on VHS recently, and we went, "Ooh,
Yeah.
this should never see the light of day."
I mean, I did a lot of vlogs, and a lot of people like those because that was like the big YouTube era and all that stuff.
Gauntlet's still up there.
The Gauntlet Challenge, yes. I was wondering, what are you talking about, Gauntlet? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
the Gauntlet Challenge. But
Yeah.
that was in college. But this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
in high school. We would go to like the local haunted house. I would like go to like the state fair, all these things. And I would record like little things. And then like a lot of people were like, I want to hear. And I would like do like this kind of like, I don't know, essay about these certain things. Like going out to like WonderCon and meeting Jim Lee, these things, or like the trip to like my leadership symposium, and everyone's like, "Oh, I want to watch this video," because I remember I started doing that for like homework assignments, where they're like, you have to make like this 2-minute like speech about this certain thing, and I was like, I'll just shoot a video about this.
Yeah.
And
So to answer my question, The Mask
the mask
was the
I'm going through the timeline.
was the movie that was like the catalyst for you wanting to be a
4
writer
hours
director.
later.
Yeah, so
I just want to make sure we have time for
please.
more of the questions here, because I want to dive into not
actual
necessarily
craft.
what got you into it. Beyond that, I just want to know, like, when you approach a project, let's say it's a project that you didn't write versus one that you do write. How do you approach the project differently from a director standpoint? How do you approach it from a writer director standpoint?
So for one that like I write, it's actually I always credit writers, because without the script, then nothing happens, right? If you don't have a story, then there is no audio engineer, there is no showrunner, there is no crew, there's no actors.
Mhm.
Like it's just a story, it's written on paper, and that's it. It's like a lot of stuff in my room.
That's what you're saying. That's the first storyteller. Director is the second, and
Yeah,
hopefully
and
last.
so and so on the perspective of if I'm directing something that I've written, a lot of the time the process is just like I'm just making sure that visually it can be done. So I'm already kind of chopping myself at the knees, because I'm thinking of what's possible versus what I want to tell. And I'm always constantly thinking of like, okay, if I'm intending to direct this, then I have to be very pragmatic in where I'm going to do it. And typically that always is telltale for one location, fewer crew.
Because you also
or
have to
fewer
think,
cast.
like you've already brought up, you also have to think about budgetary constraints. And so it's like telling a story. It's like, this is a really cool story. How can I tell it
Mhm.
the way that I want to, but that also is within what we have access to?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it comes from the fact that like I come from an indie background of like having to produce my own things, and so like the number one thing is also like, do I have the budgetary constraint to do it, but also do I have the bandwidth to swindle my collaborators to do something with me for free, right? Like everyone should be rewarded for their time and talents, particularly their talent, if anything. Like the time, they don't care about the time; they care about the talent they have at the disposal being used for you. And so you can pay them $5 bajillion, or you can pay them $500. But are you respecting of them? So when I'm writing a thing, I'm definitely just like, is this a story that I'm going to give to someone else that I'm putting in the back burner just to write it down, or is it something I'm going to make my own? And so the first thing I'm always going to do is kind of like, well, what do I want to say? And typically, I'm always looking at like, what do I want the lasting impression to be from the audience after they've watched the film? Do I want them to feel heartbroken? Do I want them to feel like they understand a little bit more of like a lesson that I've learned of like, you don't get the luxury of having closure from a relationship that's ended from the other person is indeed a luxury. Sometimes you have to build that on your own. Or is it that, life is messy, but it is worth living, like those kind of things that I think about first is overall, like, what do I want to be said and how do I want it to be said? And then I start thinking about who's saying it, what character is saying that, what part of their life are they at, and why do they need to say it? Why? And I start thinking obviously about myself and how I've learned these things. And it's like, why would this version of me in a different face and skin tone, maybe different gender, maybe a different city, maybe a different time era, why have they learned what I want them to say, and then for the audience to then pick up? And then after that, it's kind of working backwards from the end, and then I'm in the beginning, and then figuring out the middle. And then once I figure out the middle of like, okay, cool, these are the complications and why this character must go through this trials and tribulation, then I'm like, okay, does this meet? Does this fit? And then after that, I kind of start like just talking about it, and I just start bringing it up to other people so that like, does it sound like a cool story? And I kind of take a note from Chuck Palahniuk of like, if people are just like, yeah, then it's bad. But if people are like, yeah, this reminds me of this, or like, oh, I really like that, or this reminds me of this moment here, or it's like, oh,
if the conversation's more
the
in depth.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely hard as a writer director or anyone who thinks and who wants to direct. It's very hard to measure your own ego of like, don't say things, don't not bring it to other people because one, you think someone's going to steal it, which is dumb. Two, you think that someone's going to try to change it, which is dumb. Three is having the courage to say it out loud. Because you're putting yourself vulnerable in a place where it can be put on the chopping block before if it's even born. But the best thing you could do is have a group of people who you trust, who are willing to, one, support you, and also to challenge you. And then if you have those people and you talk about your ideas, you bring it into life. It's not just living in your head. You write it out on paper, it lives on paper, and then now it lives in other people's minds. And then once that happens, if people have any issues with it, then you start taking of like, how do I get them to understand what I wanted to say? If you think that this character deserves less mercy than I give it, then how can I make sure that they're more likable or more vulnerable to the point it's like, oh yeah, then maybe I should have them more we want to root for them. But skipping forward to directing that, it's kind of like I've been thinking about it for so long. Like a short film that I did. I thought about it and wrote about it and finally made it. And it took like almost like a year and a half and it was like 8 minutes long. So it was a year and a half just to make a 8 minute short. And when you're directing it, you're kind of just like wanting to replay what you thought about in visual. So it's kind of like I've been thinking about it. I've been almost dreaming about it. That's kind of like what the writing is like. I'm dreaming about it in my head.
Because we're in this part of the process, I talked about this in part one, how I sometimes when I'm working on a film, I'll mix as I go. So when you're writing and you're perfecting a script, are you kind of directing as you go too? Like you're pre-laying some of your ideas of like, oh, I could do that.
There are definitely bad habits you can pick up from writing and directing. Because you will write as if you are directing, where I have been given notes on my own writing that I direct when I write. And so people say like, I do not leave enough for the imagination. Some people really like the fact that I write and it's very descript. It's very like they move these seats, like the walls are closing in around them, that kind of thing. It's like, oh, I feel that. Some directors don't want that. And so like having to learn that
like
language.
Stage direction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the quote unquote fake rules of writing is like you're not supposed to write like we see or camera moves this way. Those are all things that you like we're not supposed to write because you want the director to do that. And that's kind of like the trick and the juggling act of like a writer is that they have to write so close but not exactly directing.
Right.
And then so the writer can be like at the end like I was happy with what I saw because it was very close to what I wrote and it was interpreted in the way that I liked it to be. But then there are things that you can write and that you that are also told that you shouldn't write of like this was the hardest thing for this character. Like that's not an actionable thing. We don't physically see that in script form, but like it helps. Like when
It's all guidelines anyway.
Well, it's like it can help the reader be like, oh, this is an important moment. Like she returns the flower back to him. This was the hardest thing she's ever had to do.
I mean,
it's like, oh, this is really big.
Yeah.
Speaking as an actor, like as an actor, you should read the whole thing, the whole script, the whole page, whatever it is, like including those parts, those stage directions, because you might miss something that the writer intended to be translated that you might not be picking up on, like as an acting decision to make of like, oh, that's important to them.
I mean,
or like
Tom recently gave me the Logan, and it has a lot of that kind of stuff that isn't shown actually in the movie. That is put in there. I mean, there's even an opening like aside to the reader that's like, yo, if you think this is the Wolverine we've seen, it's not.
If you fall off a building, they're dead. They don't bounce.
Yeah. It's
not a CGI
all of these things are guidelines, right? And whatever you find fits your script the best and helps you write it, do it.
And I mean, that's the thing, right? Writer-director is different than a writer. A writer has to be a professional in a point of like, they have to meet deadlines. They have to write it so that it's entertaining for people who are above their pay grade. A writer-director gets to write the stuff that they're going to direct. So they get to have their own lingua franca within their own writing versus a writer-director or a writer has to be like, this has to be industry standard and almost sterile to the point, but like the story just has to be there.
Yeah.
So
I guess my question is then, in that case, taking that information of how you write and how you approach your scripts when you're directing it, how, still staying with the question of how you approach a project when you're directing someone else's writing, what are the things you look for in a script in that sense as well?
Yeah, I was just gonna get to that and say, when it comes to someone else's work, I want to make sure I get the story right, and I want to make sure at first, I'm the kind of person, and this is the thing I think with young directors they kind of really need to pick up is like your ego goes out the door. You are here to collaborate. You are here to lead as a spearhead, not as a chain on a bullet. You know, like you're not here to drag everyone along. You're here to direct everyone along. So like if I get a script and I'm struggling on something like I don't know why this character is doing this. I don't know why we're saying this line 2 times. I do ask questions of like, well, can we say it this way? You know, like what kind of world are you wanting? Because this is what I'm gonna bring to the table. Like if you want to say you want to be like you want to be like an Edgar Wright character. Then I was like, okay, cool. But then that means your character has to be likable. So if your character's not likable, then you're gonna have a lot of problems with all these jokes. Or like, and that's the thing where like I come in and I don't really, I come off as like someone who doesn't have a lot of humor in my directing and in my film collection, but like it's because I want to just take the storytelling very seriously and I want to give the freedom to the actors to live into those characters, but I want to make sure that the scene is relevant. We can have funny talking head jokes all the time, but like if the scene isn't pertinent, like every scene should have a purpose. But then if the jokes that live out like within that scene and they lead on to the next scene, I'm totally fine. That's all game. That makes the viewing experience better. That makes the reading experience better. But we have to have a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I kind of come when I look at other people's writing is kind of like, let me make sure that I know what you want particular, and can I do that? And are there going to be liberties that the writer is willing to let go of? Because kind of the trust that happens with the writer and director is that the director is going to try their best to interpret it the way that they can and tell the story, whether that is in wider shots, closer shots, tracking shots, or in different lightings that's not so, that has a better, higher
And
contrast.
it goes to the editor. And
Or even it's like, okay, cool, we don't need that. We're going to do quick cuts, blah, blah. Like the director does have to keep those things in mind to keep the idea of like the momentum and how it flows. As long as the writer is like saying like, cool, this is what I want. This is how the story is being told. It's like, cool. If the writer says like, this is a frenetic moment and crazy and it's going to have quick banter, it's like, okay, the director kind of knows like how they want to do it.
I didn't get to say this in part one when we were talking about audio, but part of the process that I'm liking it to is that when somebody comes to me about a project and one of the things that I ask for is initial thoughts of like talking to them about like, what's the feel here? Are there specific things that you're like, you want to be translated into? And it sounds like that's kind of what you're looking to, when you're directing somebody else's thing, you're looking to understand it so that you're not only, you're coming to it as an artist, but you're also like, somebody wrote this. This is their artistry. And it's like, I want to represent their artistry in my artistry so that it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Like we said.
I mean, there's something that can be said about just like, you can get really, really commercial about it and get really, really like, hey, it's by the numbers. We know what we're doing. Go to your, first position, second position, move to the camera at 1, 2, and 3, all this stuff. And then it becomes very sterile where it's just like, cool, we're just going through the motions. But then if we change it, we move the camera, we put it into another perspective, then it's like, cool, the story's now changing. Like instead of being, face onto these two characters, we're going to be over the shoulder of this one character the entire time looking at another character. So we're on this other character's side. And so,
or as Fincher does when he likes to do these high corner shots where you show the person's apartment and their state of living and you go, oh, I know who they are now.
Yeah. And you could do that in other cutaways where they're talking, but then like we're looking at other things in the house. So it kind of explains that, if someone says like, yeah, we don't, it's like, dad has never come back ever since then. And then we see a picture of, the girl and the mom and the dad. And then you're like, okay, then the mom's dead, something like that. And then you don't know why the mom's dead. And you find out that the daughter killed her or something like that. So
yeah,
there's things that you can do to kind of frame the audience's head. And I always just kind of think of things that the writer may have thought about. And maybe I asked them like sometimes like, did you have an idea of what you wanted in particular? Because I try to be very like collaborative, make sure that everyone feels like I'm not stomping all over them, because even though like I'm writer director, like I think the idea and pretentiousness of like my vision and my perspective goes down the drain when no one wants to work with you. And I think kind of the most important thing as a director is to make sure that everyone feels like they're being fulfilled. And that was kind of the thing that going back to the very first question of like, when did I realize I wanted to direct, was one of the first few times I started directing. In high school, I started doing these like little cover music video things. Like Linkin Park doesn't have a music video for this song. Let's do a version of the music video. And I started directing people, and it was kind of like, wow, I'm kind of coordinating things, and I'm getting to tell a story because I hated music videos that didn't have a story. And so like one of them was like about some girl who didn't get like who got like dumped on Valentine's Day or something like that. And I was like, let's tell the story. And then we did it, and it was fun. And then like we'll definitely say like as a young dude, I got to be like to a pretty girl, like, do you want to be in a music video? And you know, like that was
I'm like making a music video.
And that was kind of fun, right? and you could tell a story and all this.
Sorry, Josh and I play music.
And you know, and I only put myself in it because no one else wanted to act, and I was like, oh, I don't want to act either. But like that really got me. It's like, oh, I could assemble it. I made a thing, and I'm replaying what I envisioned in my mind, and I got to put the camera wherever I wanted to. I didn't know any of the rules, but learning more about it really kind of, again, that's why I say it's the kind of the miracle thing. Is like as a kid, I was like, I want to direct, and then as I got older and kept learning about it, I was just like, I really like this. I really love this. Thank God, like I throw a rock in the darkness and it's something I really loved to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate enough now that people that I've met because of Nerd On want to work with me more. So I'm just like, thank God.
I learned this in an acting class, but it's applied through everything. An acting teacher once said, just be a cool dude. Just when you audition, when you interview, or when you're meeting somebody, you're not actually auditioning or meeting for the thing that you're doing it for. You're there to see if you guys can work together for 6 months, a year. Who knows how long this relationship will keep going, but it's just like being a collaborative spirit, being a good dude, that kind of stuff. That it sounds. I mean, I've worked with you from an actor standpoint and from a post-production standpoint, and you're a good dude, man.
We can share this a little bit again without name dropping or anything like that. It's interesting to think, and it sucks because the whole idea of Hollywood nepotism is a very real thing. But man, sometimes I have definitely been able to pick out people of like, you're not where I need you to be in terms of skill set yet. And I haven't even had you audition. And I just know that you're not there. And there's a level of like, I can't spend 6 hours of the day directing you to help you along with these lines or with this performance, where there are people who I know that I can like, I have never worked with them. It's like, oh, they're going to be good. They're going to be fine. And, luckily with everyone that I've worked with in storyboard, like we've gotten to work with each other at such a capacity that like, even though they're used to playing one character, they've been very flexible and chameleon like to go into other kind of characters and other depths with things that I like in my own writing and directing projects, that are not sketch, but they are part of the dramedy. So
yeah. I'm gonna ask you the same question that you asked me without dropping names. What has been, as I'm going to focus on directing here. What has been your best experience and least favorite experience as directing?
Best, and you guys have been in both of them. But I mean, I have to think. I'm trying to be. Is there any more variables? I mean, so this is the thing. I am like Wes Craven in a way where I think every film I've done prior to the one I'm doing now is shit. And so. One
That's
film,
very Wes Craven.
Yeah, one film that I was working on. It was like, to me, it was like, this is the culmination of my experiences here in LA at that time, and we were able to assemble a crew, a very familiar crew that I worked with, and got the producers, and I got to be like in a one location bar. That's all I'm gonna say, and it was really nice. Like it was I
know that reference.
Yeah, it was very fast, quick shoot. And everyone knew what they wanted to do. Everyone knew where they were at. It felt almost as close as professional as I can make it for the budget that we had and for everything that was going on. All the actors had their own holding stages. We had all the crafty, everything. It was great. And I ended up bringing a friend up who had left the film industry to be the director of photography one last time. And it was great because I got to just really wear one hat. I didn't have to AD, I didn't have to produce, I didn't have to do any of
Oh
that
man,
stuff.
yeah.
And I just got to sit in a director's chair and hold a monitor or just look at the actors and be like, okay, go. And it was fun. And when I wanted to do producer stuff, like the producer's like, Tom, go away. I was like, thank you.
You right?
That's awesome.
When you write, you're right.
And the funny thing is,
Oh, I'm living.
that film compared to the first film I did here in LA, like the first film I ever did was way more was way like better received. The worst film I ever worked on, I mean, as a director, okay, as a director, the worst experience I ever had was one that went all around to LA. It was pulling a lot of favors. It took a huge chunk out of my own personal pocket, and the reason that I would say that characterized why it was a really terrible experience is because there was a lot of when you jump into a project, it is a leap of faith. It is like, can I trust these people? Especially when you're in the indie world, you're not going to get compensated. But are you going to feel fulfilled at the end of it? Are you going to feel like, cool, I'm going to be okay with these dumb film festival awards that don't mean anything, and walk away happy? And this is one of those like, did we feel like this was going to pan out in a good way? Maybe at the first few moments, yes. But then later on, it just kind of became this like crappy experience where there's a lot of discord because you had people who hadn't worked with each other before. You had some people who'd worked with each other, and now there's new elements that are kind of changing the dynamic. And that's kind of the thing as a director for me. Like, I really adore like a Clint Eastwood set, which is kind of like Tom likes Nazi rule because he likes it quiet. If you're working, there's no need to talk.
Also, it's 9 to 5.
Yeah. And there's something really nice to me. It's nice to think about where it's like, yeah, there's not all this chaos and clutter and noise that I had to step out of the room just to have a conversation where it's like, okay, cool. Everyone's quiet and we all could speak quietly and everyone knows what they're doing. This here was constantly yelling and screaming left and right of like, what's happening? Here's that. And there's a lot of feet being stepped on of like the writer not wanting to let go of the script in order for me to direct it.
It sounds like there's not a good. We've brought up this a few times so far in just part 1 and part 2 is that collaboration is so important. And the teamwork aspect of filmmaking is incredibly
It's got to be a give and take.
I mean, that's the thing where like if I'm writing by myself, right, and another director wants to take it, it's like, cool, I wrote it, goodbye. That's it. I don't expect anything more from that. I don't expect you to give me a phone call or you to ask me if you understand the story. When I write it and send it off, I'm done. Like, that's how a professional workplace is. It is a privilege to have the director say, come to set. Hey, I want to talk to you more about this. I want to work on the script with you. The director could say, bye-bye, and you're fine. But, like this, and this is one of the cases where I was like, let's work together on this. Let's be more collaborative of this. But now if I could change anything about it, I would have been a little bit more strong arm of like, this is going to be a closed set. And that's kind of the thing where if I can have that my way most of the time for closed sets, it's really nice. Especially now during COVID, like having closed sets is really wonderful because there's not so much people just watching, eating sandwiches and having conversations, and maybe a phone goes off or something, or a door's opening because someone has to use a restroom. But it's like, everyone get the hell out. Let me just work with the actors and directors. Let me work with the actors and camera, and we can actually show a great performance of what we're trying to do. So yeah. Worst and best.
There you go. There you have it. I guess moving into the kind of, as a director, we kind of understand how you are on set, making sure everyone's happy, working with certain people, making sure the actors, both of us having been actors under your directorial care, very, very attentive to what we need, what we're going through, and very communicative on all that. I want to know from a post standpoint, what does that look like for you as a director moving into post-production, editing, sound, the finished product, color, all that kind of stuff?
It is the worst experience.
Oh yeah,
it is the worst experience. It is the constant of heartache and love of outside of production of, oh my God, this movie we just shot, I hate it. It was so hard and it was so draining, and we're gonna go into this long process of multiple cuts and multiple passes that are marginally different, and I'm not going to see what I wanted to see. And then all of a sudden you get like the second cut, and you're just like, oh my god, this is the greatest film I've ever written around in my life. and then you start getting to color, and you're like, oh, I hate this movie. This is the worst movie I've ever made in my life. And then all of a sudden you get the sound, you're like, oh, this is the greatest movie of all time. And then again, you don't know exactly what's going to happen when you change values and you grade it in certain ways, and you like take away some shadows, and you're like, oh my god, we're getting really cool. We're doing some cool like stuff. Like maybe every time we go into this scene, it gets darker, and then we're showing like the descent of these characters. And you're like, oh yeah, we could do that because that is happening. It's being part of the visual storytelling process, right? Like you can read a script and be like, that's a book, but if you tell that visually and be like, oh, let's change the like. You can literally in post production, you could do a lot. You could change literal light directions if you wanted to, and I think that's just like a really cool thing that you can do in post production. But for me, it's most of the same way, exactly how I treat other actors or other department heads of like, hey, this is the idea. This is what I want. This is the copy of the script. We talked about this. We know the kind of scope of this. You know where it's going to go. And when it comes to composers or audio, post production audio, comes to editing, comes to color, I'll definitely use a lot of references. And that's kind of the trick that I find is using these shorthands, right? And that's why nepotism exists, is because when you work with the same crew, you can have shorthands and say like, hey, can we make it more traffic looking? Can we make it more Born Identity looking? Can we make, you have these certain things that you're like, oh, it has reference points. And so a lot of the times
Crush blacks and highlights,
and
good contrast,
and a lot of contrast, maybe. And those
Tom's
are
color preferences. If
Yeah,
you guys aren't familiar with it.
I like true black and high contrast. Color, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Having those shorthands are great. But the same way I treat everyone that technically would be working on this project, like I want to make sure that I can do everything I can to make sure that they feel like they have all the tools at their disposal, right? Like when you don't like give a slate for something and you give it to an editor, like you just chop them at their knees, right? If you don't give an audio engineer like the stems, you chop them at their knees. They have to find all those things, all this stuff. You don't have a good file convention nor numbering format. You gave everyone a headache, right?
What does A-0394AB mean?
Yeah. Like that doesn't mean it. Day 1, day 2 doesn't mean anything to them. They need, the locations. They need the actor, then all that stuff. And also like that's the same thing with
my head hurt just you saying that.
The same thing like that it goes with everything. Like doing credits, like, oh, I don't know, we didn't have a call sheet. It's like, what, guys? And so like there is so many things that you can do in the beginning that's so much harder, but it will save you later. It is drunk you taking care of hungover you.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good way to put it.
I always like at the end of a project, I don't know if you have this experience, but when I'm working on a film, and sometimes I get the privilege of, while I'm working on it, they're like, oh, we have a color. You always have to get the locked version, but when I get the final cut and I'm doing my work to it, and then they're like, ooh, we have a colored version, and I get to put my sound on the, like, this is the final cut, baby, and you experience
Final.
this is the final again, and you play it back and you're like, it's a fucking movie.
Yeah.
I made a movie.
And then they're like,
this is cool.
They're like, all right, one more color.
Can we add a sound effect here? Final.
Yeah.
Final. I swear this is it.
This is the end of this.
And then you get to see it. You get to see it on like a screen. I think that's
it's always fun to see. Like, man, this is like the 14th cut of this. I'm like, my god, like does this really need to be 14?
But the
versions?
festivals see final.
They see final.
Yeah.
They see final.
I'll be honest with you. One of the coolest things was seeing some of our projects on a movie theater screen. Like that's a cool feeling to see. No, regardless how we feel about the finished product, getting to see something you've made up on the screen there is something special that not everyone gets to, at least not the people who didn't pay the admission fee for the festival, but not everyone gets to experience, right? So I think that's pretty neat. I want to ask you one of the questions you asked. Same thing, lists here, Tom. We all love lists. What is like the top 5 things that if you were to, someone would come to you and say, hey, I want to start learning about directing or writing, and maybe you can do 3 for each or 5 for each. What would be some bits of advice for, these are the things you should start looking out for? Study, watch films. These are the things you start looking out for directing and writing wise.
Writing. Read scripts. Read books. We all have stories in ourselves. We all have a story to say. Every story is valid. but you need to find the language to say it. Whether that's making your own language, you still need to learn the actual language. And that means like knowing how to format, knowing how to, you can't just, I want you to think that you could just go out and write it, but it really helps if you start really understanding page count and pacing of the page count, and then also how does action lines look like.
Just
and how,
thinking of you getting all our PA scripts and going, my God, this is a fucking mess.
I mean, and that's the thing. It's just like making
it
it
just right.
Yeah, making it enjoyable to read that everyone can read it, and also you're not shuffling through 4 pages of just like notes.
Yeah.
Bonnie, I was based on what you just said. Bonnie is a writer, and she can look at a script and go, "Yeah, it's 9 minutes."
Yeah,
and be right.
There are many applications, so find them and use them. My favorite one's Highland 2. It's free. John August, who is a writer, literally developed this app. Use those apps. Learn how to use those apps.
It's fantastic.
You can do Final Draft. You can do Writers Duet. You can do Celtics. You can do whatever the heck you want to do, but just learn how to use those things, because that will help you learn shorthand. So it will help you learn how to crunch that out. Writing as well. Third thing, dedicate the time. You dedicate time to eat, you dedicate time to sleep, you dedicate time to touch yourself or touch your lover. Dedicate the time to actually get your craft done.
I don't dedicate time to sleep, but I should.
And it's one of those things, like if you want to be professionally writing, you are on deadlines. It is not, based on the passion and my muse. It's no, you're on deadline. You got to write this thing now. You got to get 4 pages in, and you have to send it tomorrow. That's the discipline. You got to get that down, whether it's on physical, you're handwriting yourself, or you're typing it down in note form. You have to start writing. Writing is the only way to get better at writing, is to write it. Fourth thing I would say is watch how those scripts that you've read now and how they translate into film.
Mm-hmm.
See what actually matters and see what doesn't matter. And then the last thing I would say with writing is look at what those scripts have done and changed. But the thing is, I want you to reference the things that mattered to you the most that weren't accentuated in the film. So like if you are looking at leaves rustling and footsteps crunching on them, but then the opening shot is some guy just walking, obviously that didn't matter. They didn't do a low end shot. So, realizing what do you want accentuated when you write down should be accentuated, but also that's building your own language and how you write. And also you should be writing in the form that you're writing. So if you're writing a noir, there better be Venetian blinds, there be some cigarettes on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to understand the genres that you're in. If you're in a bland, baseless genre, then it's going to sound bland and baseless. It's going to be boring. Things have to be happening. For directing, throw your ego out the window. It's not about you. It is about you. You're an artist and you want to be all Tim Burton bullshit. It's about you. It's about you, but no one needs to.
What did Tim Burton do?
I don't know. Just he never read a comic book before he went into Batman.
Oh, okay.
But like no one needs to know it's about you. Fuck you. No one cares.
Yeah.
It's about everyone caring about this story that you're telling.
Right.
You have to then earn their trust. Second thing, earn your keep. Fucking the people that are around you are going to talk about it. So the only way people want to work with you is if you genuinely make it worth their while. So if you're a piece of shit director who doesn't give a damn and thinks things are beneath you, you're going to lose friends very quickly and all those collaborators. Unless your fucking name is, I don't know, something Spielberg, and then everyone's going to be, we'll just give them a movie for no reason, right? Like if you're going to make it out on your own and you want to tell stories, work really hard. Learn as much as you can how to do it all by yourself. And then all of a sudden, when you hate doing everything by yourself, then find collaborators. Third thing about directing, find out what kind of director you want to be. Like, do you want to do serious dialogue films, or do you want to do the silent films that you don't have to have a lot of expression in, but it's just mainly a lot of cool angles and concepts? Are you more of a character-driven person and you want to go into TV, or are you more of a plot concept story person and that's into film? Directing is a very vast field. It changes based on what medium you're in. If you're music video directing or if you're TV show directing, you're hardly directing. It's very different when you go into different places, but you're always going to be worrying about performances if you're working with people. And then second is going to be with camera, because again, you can replace cameras, you can't replace the people. So really figure out what kind of director you want to be. Fourth thing with directing, study the masters. Again, study the masters, not their films particularly. Yes, you want to watch their films, but you want to understand their mindsets. You want to understand their body of work. So if you want to be like, I wonder why Lana Wachowski is doing Matrix 4. I thought we said all we need to say with the third one. Like, I don't know. What do you think a transgender person would want to say in a postmodern world after a trilogy franchise, in a time where VR headsets are a reality? Like, what more can we say? So like, learn what directors are having to say, learn what Guillermo del Toro wants to say with monsters. Those are important things. You could watch all their movies and then you're not actually extrapolating any meaning. So learn what the directors actually care about, because that will teach you how to interpret what you care about into your stories.
Yeah.
And the fifth and last thing I'd say is study the way and then make your own way. It proves very helpful that you utilize and you take from what you like. I always say, like, I want to use this as my Citizen Kane shot, or I want to use this as my
Nolan shot,
or I want to use this as my, find out who you're taking from, because then it expands your vocabulary of what the film language is. And even if the actors and the camera people don't know that, you have to have those answers and say that to them and say, like, but you have to break it down in a layman's term, in a human form.
Yeah. It's that concept. And I think what Tom is basically saying in so many words, which I've had this advice thrown at me a few different times, is to watch the movies that you like and figure out why you like them. Don't just go, yeah, I like that movie. Well, why? Why do I like this director? Why do I like, specifically for me, I wanted to know why I liked Fincher so much. So I started watching every Fincher film, not going, I just watched this because I like it, but watching it with the intention to figure out, okay, well, why do I, what do I feel? Why do I feel it? And how is it being done?
I want to do one amendment for
Yes.
a sixth thing for directing.
Yeah.
People are your resource. It's not the money. It's not the technology. It's people. If you can't hack it as someone who gets along with your actors or your crew, then you can't hack it at all. Like, you are not worth anything, because at the end of the day, that's your backbone. Like, no director is any good without their actor. Corey made a slight joke about the Joker. That movie is nothing without Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
Todd Phillips can direct everything he can. It's nothing without Joaquin Phoenix. And there's several movies that are like that. So like, there's bountiful amount of movies that are like that. So if you don't have your actors, don't have your crew behind your back, are willing to work for you, it's because you're probably a piece of shit. And you need to get better at, like, making people feel like they want to do that fourth take of that 2
You are
minute
the
scene.
end all be all to the morale, and that you're sailing the ship.
Yeah, you may not be setting the pace because the AD and the producer have set the schedules, but like, on the day of, you set the emotional pace. Like, if you're late and you're 2 minutes late, you cost 100 people 2 minutes of their time. That's 200 minutes. So like, those are the very important things that you need to realize, that, like, yes, you are the director.
Considerate.
Yeah, be considerate. You're the ones who, you can cut the line and get more food. You can tell everyone when to cut. You can move on. You could be like, I don't want that shot. Or you could be like, maybe I can make this so that everyone wins. And that is like the true challenge.
Leading by example too.
Yeah, like, the true challenge is like making sure that everyone feels like they won. And that joke of, do one for the actors, do one for the camera crew. Like, if we have the time, it's worth it to try something new and make sure that everyone feels like they got a chance to actually do what they love, because you
collaborate.
Collaborate. You are the champion of love in some ways.
Message.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that everyone loves the thing and they get more invested, and it becomes their film too. So they're going to come early. They're going to work really hard. They're going to do that extra time to go over lines and stuff like that. Not because it's just a paycheck. That's why you have a bunch of great actors who phone it in for certain movies.
Yeah. Tom, this has been great, man. I can't wait for a part 2 on this.
I feel like there's definitely just like,
this
now
how Josh felt
now
at the
I
end of
was
his.
like, man, there's so much I
You're
could
like,
go
oh
into.
man, I can
Yeah,
say
yeah.
more.
Yeah,
But we're hitting that hour mark.
What
we
I
got
do-
a part 2.
What I do want to say is that as we continue to explain the film industry, there's a lot of through lines. There's a lot of things that apply one place that apply the other.
Yeah.
And Yeah, it's very cool to see.
Yeah, and just like with part 1, I want to invite the audience and listeners.
Or rather than the film industry, just the creative arts industry as a whole. So I think we're going to expand upon to more things than just film.
I want to invite the audience and the listeners, the viewers, to ask us questions that they want to hear from our perspective. Again, hearing this as someone who has never physically been paid for any directorial work, but has, moved ways, studied production and theory, and
was paid to do it.
Was I paid to do it?
You've paid to direct.
I've paid to do it. Yeah, I've paid people to do it. To understand the craft of like when to move in on a shot, when to do a close up, when to do a wide angle, when to do a shot reverse shot, or when to do a one take.
The mise en scène.
Yes, like how do you derive that meaning? Like get actually into the craft. I would love to talk about those things, at least from my own perspective, and take in for certain films of like this is what you should learn from that film and that film and that film, and this is how you do a one-er. That's not how you do a one-er.
Send those questions in.
Yeah.
This is such a funny way to do this, but this has happened to me. We stream on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
And we all individually stream on different days. And I've had people pop into my chat and ask me questions about audio, about acting, about stuff. And it's just like, that's another thing that, there's so many ways to get in contact with us, and I'm going to seg you into singing us out.
Yeah.
One of those ways is the Discords. Check out that Discord, nerdon.tv/Discord. There are so many channels in there that there's general channels, personal channels, reach out. Those are fun ways to keep the conversation going. If you are a member of the Nerd On Nation, you do get secret channels that you can get access to, that you have direct lines to us as hosts and with other members of the Nerd On Nation. And at the same time, you get other bonuses like early access, bonus episodes, all sorts of really fun stuff. And you get to support us. We get to keep doing this crazy thing that we love doing, and we get to make it better and better. So
just keep on living.
Keep on. Just living.
Just living.
Just living.
He's out there living, man.
Out there living.
So check that out, nerdon.tv/Patreon. Do share us with your friends, your family, rate and review us. All of that stuff really does matter, and it does really help us grow.
Yeah.
Check out our website, nerdon.tv. And one last shout out to Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com, get 20% off and free shipping with the code NERDON. Check it out.
It really works. When I use it, I feel like I'm not wearing hockey pads. Because I'm so
catchphrase.
Callback.
So
there
you're
it
so
is.
trimmed?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're so trimmed. Anyway, that's the episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. You know the drill. As always,
Nerd on.
Ending broadcast.